Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Claudia and welcome to another edition of Wine, Women, and Words. And this wine is sangria. That is so good. Nice and aged. In this edition of Wine, Women, and Words, I am so elated to finally discuss a book I have been wanting to read forever. And now I have read it, and I have read it thoroughly, and I have skimmed it several times to make sure that I have Michelle Obama down. This is Michelle Obama's book, Becoming. Michelle Obama has accomplished a beautiful work of autobiographical writing here. I absolutely love it, you guys. If you haven't picked up this 2018 Oprah edition for the book club book, if you are proud of a first-time African-American woman as First Lady of this great country, then you should indeed pick this book up. If you love great reading, if you simply want to look inside the window of a First Lady who tells it like it is, but tells it beautifully and tells it eloquently, then this is the book for you. I love, first of all, so much about this book. I love the color. I love the cover. I think this is a beautiful picture of our First Lady. I love her back blurb. I love the pictures in here that she has selected to be in the middle of this book. Oh my goodness, this is just pristinely perfect, just like the attire of a white drape blousey dress that she has chosen here. And kudos for giving like Michelle to some of the designers who put together her show-stopping outfits as she went on in her days as First Lady. So yes, but the back of the book says, there's a lot I still don't know about America, about life, about what the future might bring. But I do know myself. My father, Frazier, taught me to work hard, laugh often, and keep my word. My mother, Marion, showed me how to think for myself and to use my voice. Together, in our cramped apartment on the south side of Chicago, they helped me see the value in our story, in my story, in the larger story of our country, even when it's not pretty or perfect, even when it's more real than you want it to be. Your story is what you have, what you will always have. It is something to own. Michelle Obama. I'll drink to that. Michelle's story, her style, her writing is like fine wine. You have to roll it around before you gulp it, and then you let it go and you sip it. Because this is a story well worth reading. The story, Michelle's story is written in a very beautiful conversational style, very personable, as if she's speaking to a dear friend or relatives about what she's doing and where she's been. I love that the book was designed in 3 parts, just like a classic play, a movie, or any novel that I write or any other writer. We know that Act 1 opens that story and sets the scene and paints the characters. We know that Act 2 sets up the staging. In Act 2, we have the middle portion of the book The stage has already been set, and we are watching the drama play out in Act 3 or Part 3. We are looking at everything wind down to a denouement or an ending or resolution. Same here with Michelle's Becoming. Act 1 or Part 1 is entitled Becoming Me. And in the book, she gives us a picture of little girl Michelle. We see her life characterized by strong family role models, family love. We see the love that buoys her up in the world with Marion and Fraser as loving parents, strong parents who teach her different things. We see her brother, her big brother, giving her, Craig, giving her all the nurturing and love that big brothers can give when they give you time and space and advice and encouragement. And we see that throughout the book, where Craig is a very important part, just like her parents throughout the story. In the first part of the book, I absolutely love it when she's striving in school, when she's striving outside of school with her great aunt Robbie downstairs in the building, helping her with piano lessons, and she's letting her voice be known with Robbie, because Robbie is strong-willed and she's strong-willed, and she wants to do what she wants to do with those piano lessons. But I love it that she learns to bow to Robbie but still maintain her own creativity, which is what she takes with her throughout life. In Becoming Me, something that I remember is just that her father, she says, my father, I remember, made a point of saying that sex was and should be fun. I love that she said that. Why? Because my father said, sex is a gift from God and sex is good. Because sometimes I think we tend to think that we should be removed from sex, and that sex should only be a part of marriage, and we shouldn't explore sex but be ready when marriage comes. At least that's what I was thinking. But I loved it that Fraser, her father, gave her that encouragement. That, I don't know if this is coming off right. But her father and mother gave her advice throughout the first part, and I love that they let her be independently who she was without really crushing her spirits to say, you do what I say, not as I do, as some parents will tend to smother the fire and life from their children by holding them to such stringent standards that they themselves weren't held to. I thought that her parents were great role models. So when you're reading autobiographical work, you can't help but to bring yourself also to the page. Her dad's Buick was one of the joys of Fraser's life. And she says it was his window to the world, their window to the world. They went so many places in that Buick and loved it. And then I think about my dad and how he loved his new Cadillacs every year. And those Cadillacs were also our window to the world, because in those new cars each year, we made trips to the South regularly. Often we went to Niagara Falls. We did the World's Fair when we were babies, when my siblings and I were babies and couldn't remember the World's Fairs. I don't even think we have World Fairs now, but at least there were pictures of us in our parents' arms in those Cadillacs, seeing the world and seeing those activities and participating in those activities. And one thing I remember I loved so much about our Cadillacs was that in them we went to the seaside and we went to the drive-in. We went to the drive-in often, and that's one experience that I want to give the little people in this family, where we all pile in together, all the cousins, and go make memories. Because that's one thing Michelle does in the opening of Becoming Me, was to tell us about the beautiful memories that she and her family had when she was growing up. I remember that Michelle and her family lived in a little cramped apartment on the top of her Aunt Robbie, and her great Aunt Robbie and her great Uncle Terry lived in the apartment below. And when I think about that and think about my own childhood, I remember that my father owned the building, and it was a 3-story family building in Waterbury, Connecticut. And we lived on the bottom floor. And on the middle floor, we had an uncle, Uncle Junior. And he was my paternal uncle. And on the 3rd floor was my maternal auntie, Aunt Sutta, and her boys. So yes, our stories are very similar in different areas. And I just love that when you can read an autobiographical work and just find yourself and your experience right there, kind of like right there in the same, because we're African American women. We strive, we striven to be the best that we can be throughout our lives, and I understand that. I understand young Michelle striving so hard in school to be somebody and to give her best academically each day. I understand her mother, Marion, going to the school to get her out of the classroom where the school had put her with other students who were doing everything but learning. And Marion was like, no, 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 no. We're not going to do this. Get my daughter out of this classroom. And how she flourished in a different milieu, in a different environment. I get that. I would have done the same thing for my son. And I know my mother did and would have done the same thing for me. Education, it is so imperative in certain families, in our families, in your family, I'm sure. I loved the sister friends that Michelle Obama had throughout her life. Even now, I love that Santita Jackson was one of her friends that she met early on in her life. And for those of you who don't know Santita Jackson is Jesse Jackson's daughter. I love that she met a young lady at Princeton, a Suzanne Alele, or Alele, A-L-E-L-E. Suzanne taught her so much about life, and Suzanne taught her about living joyfully. And she taught her with the example of her life. I loved that because Suzanne died young. And in her young life and her friendship with Michelle, Michelle saw her stop, swerve, and do different things off the beaten path. And whereas Michelle would be going, why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you going to take that job? Why aren't you going to do this? Suzanne would stop and go, no. I know I don't want to take that job. It's just too much of my time with that job. I don't want to work that hard. I'm going to go over here and do this. And Suzanne did exactly what she wanted to do, contrary to what anybody thought. And she did it joyfully. And I love that. Simply love it. When people were telling her, don't go on a weekend with this rapper, Suzanne was like, what? And went on that weekend and had a great time. The rapper showed her a beautiful weekend. But Suzanne became ill after going out of the country with her mother, I don't know, to some parts of Asia, I believe. She came back and died shortly thereafter, and her mother died before Suzanne died. But the thing about that was Suzanne had lived her life on her terms, the way she wanted to live it. And that taught Michelle, and it taught me reading it, a lot about doing what you love to do. When you love to do it, because of the reasons you love to do it. You know you, or you should be in the process of learning you. In this part of the book, Michelle is not plagued, but she ponders the question quite a bit. Am I good enough? Am I enough? And all along the way, it comes to her. Yes, you are. You most certainly are. But like Michelle, I'm the same way. At different points in my earlier life, I would wonder, am I good enough? When I went up for competitions in school and as a teacher, as a professional, as a consultant, am I good enough? You question yourself. And I think questioning is a wonderful thing because it leads you to the answer. And if it's not the answer you want to hear, you are willing to do whatever it takes to do what you want to do so you can be good enough. In this part of the book, I love it when the idea of swerving comes up. Sometimes we got to swerve. I've swerved throughout my life, and I know you have swerved throughout yours as well. What do I mean? What do I mean? Let me go to Michelle's words exactly on page 87. And I am going to give you in Michelle's words what she meant. Michelle says, and this also will give you an idea about the beauty of Michelle's writing. Here's a memory, which like most memories is imperfect and subjective, collected long ago like a beach pebble and slipped into the pocket of my mind. That sentence is simply, purely, quintessentially exquisite. It's from sophomore year of college and involves Kevin, my football player boyfriend. In this story, she and Kevin are making a drive. Then Kevin gets to this part of the road where there's a field out there, and he says, Michelle, come on, let's run through this field. I'm going to park on the side of the road, and let's run through this field. Michelle is like, what? Are you kidding? The schoolgirl prim proper Michelle could not veer from that road like, did he lose his mind? But she finally swerves. She lets him talk her into running across that field. She is filled with the joy of living. They're just laughing and running and having a great time. And in that moment, in that simple moment, she learns the joy of swerving. That sometimes you just got to get off your path. You just got to be open to doing that spontaneous, joyful thing in the moment. And she swerves much later in her life, as you will see. This part of the book, Becoming Me, takes us into Michelle leaving Princeton and going on to Harvard. And going on to Harvard University. Not in social work, a swerve, but in law. Yes, she takes the LSAT exam and she goes to law school at Harvard. When she graduates, she is given a position, or she earns a position at Sidley and Austin law firm. Guess what? In the IP department, in the marketing and intellectual property department, which was a department in the firm that others considered very creative and freewheeling. So there she is, let us say, in the very best part of the law firm. And I got tickled at this point because I had already started writing my novel, and my character was a lawyer. And before I read this part, my character had already decided to swerve and leave law and go into what she wanted to do, what she loved doing but had never given herself the opportunity to do. And here it was, Michelle was stepping onto the law escalator, but she would swerve later because she would want to do something that was more meaningful in her life than just pushing briefs and paperwork. Although be it prestigious, she wanted to do something with meaning for herself and the community, and she would swerve. This section takes us into part 2, or Becoming Us. I love the way it was designed. Becoming us. Who would the us be? The us would be in that law firm of Sydney and Austin. She would get a chance to mentor a young man, handsome, intelligent, debonair, dashing, and fiercely independent. She would get a chance to mentor a summer mentoree who would go on to become not only her love, her husband, but the 44th President of the United States of America. And from my time in being an adult and noticing and observing and knowing political life and understanding presidents and what their platforms were, I can say that Barack Obama, the man that Michelle met on the 47th floor of the Sydney and Austin building, was the greatest president of the United States that I have ever known, imagined, in print or in life. Kudos, Michelle. Kudos, Barack. Let's drink to that. In part 2, Becoming Us, we see Michelle fall deeply in love with Barack Obama. He was late on the first day he was to walk into her office at the law firm, and she didn't like being late. But when she opened her heart to this young man that everybody was so enamored with, she fell in love. She allowed herself to feel the feelings that deeply connected her to Barack Obama. And in this part, we see them build the beginning of their life together. We see Barack reading and studying and working on a grassroots community level and having an impact on Michelle. We see her now, instead of going out with her friends, we see her at home on a Saturday night, reading, cuddled up with a good book, reading, a habit that would stay with her, and Barack in his man cave at the house. On and on and on into their courtship and marriage. In this part of the book, we meet Ann Dunham and Barack's grandmother. We know that Ann Dunham was a college student in 1960 in Hawaii when she met and fell in love with Barack Obama, the man who is Barack's father. We see that everything went the way that it went with Barack and Ann taking her little Barack and going off to Southeast Asia, where she remarried, went on with her life, and raised this extraordinary young man. His family was totally different from Michelle's family, but she loved every bit of it. The difference was and is and should be with all of us respected and admired, especially if it's wholesome. Barack's community work took him away from Michelle quite a bit in the middle part of the book. So what I admired about that was Michelle had to know herself and hold it together while he was away, instead of allowing that to have them drift apart. I respect that when they got back together, the relationship was even stronger. So I know that a love can survive even if one party is away doing the work that he or she does, because Michelle was at home doing everything she needed to do to be the great girlfriend and then later the great wife. She had made the choice to love a man like Barack. And on loving a man like Barack, she learned that he will need to be shared. He had to be shared with the larger community, with the state when he became a congressman, and then eventually with the country when he became the 44th president of the U.S. In Becoming Us, Frazier transitions. It crushes Michelle and Craig and the family. Because Frazier was a rock. Frazier went to work and cared for his family even as he came day after day closer to leaving with an illness. He made it up, shaking and trembling, but he made it up and went to work. Frazier was a man who knew how to take care of his family, and in loving them, put himself second and his family first, and get out there and do what he had to do at that water plant day after day. I also love that Marion said at one point that she wanted to leave Frazier, but she always made the decision to stay, that family was important. And I'm glad she did, because she was able to stay with Frazier until he left, and to know that her life would go on to meteoric stages when she became the mother to the First Lady of the United States. Even though she was not the showy, flashy, out in front, up here with my daughter and the rest of the first family type of mother, she was there. She saw it. She was in the White House with the family. She was able to live and grow and experience different things right there. So she really didn't, when you think about it, have to leave Frazier to do anything, because her life happened magnanimously. In this part of the book, Becoming More, she opens with the sentence, "There is no handbook for becoming the First Lady of the United States. But let me tell you, Michelle Robinson Obama did not need a handbook. Michelle was a stupendous example. She was a marvelous handbook in herself, living and breathing. By this time, she had stood in quite a few rooms as the first black woman in that room. When she walked into rooms to campaign, when Barack was campaigning for president, she was a black woman in that room speaking to encourage voters to vote for Barack Obama and to encourage supporters of Barack's campaign and people who might support Barack if the right words were said. She was a woman willing, able, and capable of doing that, and she did. Now, Michelle does say that she ran into some sticky parts when people started making judgments about what she had said when she stood to speak to voters and crowds, and the campaign never really said, no, this is what you should have, this is your script. She was just mindful that criticism and judgment was out there. And I love that she went on anyway and did and said and was even more glorious than the day before. Do it, Michelle. Do it. Be you. Take the criticism and go on and still blaze a trail. Okay? I love that Laura Bush was a part of the welcoming team, she and her husband, and were showing the girls different parts of the White House where they could slide down the hallway and have a good time. And that they said that their daughters would be so glad to come and help Sasha and Malia enjoy that White House from a different point of view. It was wonderful. I loved seeing the first family through Michelle's eyes take on the White House with all the many rooms and the different colors and the different things that they did in the White House for the first time, like the pictures and commissioning different things. Oh, I was like, yes, I felt like a girlfriend listening to Michelle tell me what was going on in her life at this point. I loved seeing Sasha and Malia, the little loves of Michelle's life, come into themselves as little people, tired and, trying to stay strong on the stage while the father is speaking, while Michelle was speaking, how they were playful, and they're children. They were children, but they made the transition from their life in Chicago to the great scene of the White House beautifully. Why? Hey, they're little people, raised by Michelle Obama and her mother and Barack. They had no other choice. I loved it. I love that the little people, Sasha and Malia, were mindful of the public's critical eye, that they were being judged at every moment when they went out. Or it was something for them to learn what it was to be involved in the pageantry of the Secret Service and all the things that had to go into place just for Barack to take Michelle on a date. All the things that had to happen. And all the opinions that came out as far as how much money was spent to protect the president when he took his wife out to dinner. It was great reading about that. It was just like being privy to a front row seat of a life that I haven't known, that I haven't had friends to have walked in her shoes. It was in this part, becoming more. I so admired Michelle for the platform that she took to be the First Lady and the things that she would hold near and dear to her campaign and her heart. When she looked at the obesity rates of American children and the amounts of salt and sugar and other additives that they didn't need in their food, and she took on the challenge of the food industry by saying to people in high places with the power to do something about it, we need to do something about American obesity in children, in families, period, in people. So please be mindful of the content that goes into American school lunches. I love that she championed fresh vegetables and growing your fresh vegetables. I love that she grew fresh vegetables at the White House and how it had never been done before and people were going, what? Folks, I absolutely loved that the White House was an open door to children. And children were invited in because they made Michelle happy. They made Barack happy. People were happier. People are happier when children are around. Well, a lot of people are happier when children are around. Some are not. But that was, to me, just simply, purely, just divine. Just divine. To open up the White House, to let them know, to let children know that this is not inaccessible. This is where you one day could be. This is what we do in the White House. We have fun here. We learn here. I love that she had a Let's Move campaign that allowed more salad bars, or simply salad bars, to be in American schools. I love that the Let's Move campaign also reminded people to get up and do something, work that body, exercise. Eat right and exercise for a better quality life. I love, as I said before in the beginning, that Michelle put the spotlight on lesser known designers, African American and Latino designers, to get their designs before the public's eye when she put them on. Because people talked about what she had on. And people talked about Michelle Obama, how statuesque she was. She said, most times it was good, but sometimes, and you all know how people can be, a lot of times it was bad, and people were saying different things. They were talking about how sculpted her arms were, and that reminds me I need to lift some weights to get my arms back tight myself. But they were talking about her looks and her behind and just all different things. Grown people, people in political life. That's what prejudice can do for you. But with that sometimes, not sometimes, with that you keep that head high, you keep your exquisite self looking forward, and you keep it popping. Better than you were before they said it. So in the end, Michelle says, am I enough? And the answer was, yes, absolutely. You are enough. And yes, you are enough. Yes, you watching it, watching this. Thank you so much for watching it to this point, but you are enough. I am enough. Just get up and keep moving. Keep living your dreams. Keep working towards whatever you feel passionate about. And the last thing that I'm going to share, because I don't care. This video is long, so what? If you don't want to watch it, don't watch it. You know? I'm an ordinary person who found herself on an extraordinary journey. I hope to help create space for other stories and other voices to widen the pathway for who belongs and why. I've been lucky enough to get to walk into stone castles, urban classrooms, and Iowa kitchens, just trying to be myself, just trying to connect. For every door that's been opened to me, I've tried to open my door to others. And here's what I have to say, finally. Let's invite one another in. Maybe then we can begin to fear less, to make fewer wrong assumptions, to let go of the biases and stereotypes that unnecessarily divide us. Maybe we can better embrace the ways we are the same. It's not about being perfect. It's not about where you get yourself in the end. There's power in allowing yourself to be known and heard, in owning your unique story. This, for me, is how we become. That ending is a benediction. It is a prayer for all of us to open the door, to invite you in, to know and hear and share our stories. Not to close a door, not to say how you are unworthy and only I am superior, but to open a door to the becoming of the self, to the becoming of each of us, so that we can understand one another's walk and be the better for it. So share your authentic voice. Speak up and allow the universe to help you be you. So Unbecoming, or Becoming by Michelle Obama. I hope you've enjoyed this Wine, Women, and Words with Claudia. Because truly, I have enjoyed sharing Michelle's story. And it's 2020. So even if you pick this book up in 2021, enjoy and let it touch your life. Bye. See you in the next video.